This is YodTalks open concept paper, The End of the Old World, a New Architecture for Human Civilization. This is not a policy proposal. It is a map of what is already happening and an invitation to those building the tools of tomorrow to understand what those tools are truly for. First, the collapse. Why the old world is already ending. We are living through the most comprehensive trust collapse in recorded modern history. Governments, financial institutions, media, corporations, religious bodies, and international organizations have each, in their own way, forfeited the confidence of the people they were meant to serve. This is not a crisis of one system, it is a systemic crisis of the very logic on which these institutions were built. Centralized power, geographic partitioning, representative abstraction, and fear as the primary instrument of social order. Wars are being started by a small number of individuals with access to power, while the vast majority of people on every side want something entirely different: safety, dignity, connection, and the freedom to build meaningful lives. The gap between the will of the people and the decisions of the so-called representatives has never been wider. The consent of the governed has become a fiction. The post-pandemic era accelerated this disillusion. Lockdowns, mandates, economic disruption, and the visible incompetence and corruption of governing bodies stripped away any remaining illusion of institutional trustworthiness. People stopped believing, and when people stop believing, the system loses its only real source of power, legitimacy. This is not a catastrophe, it is a threshold, though. Every major civilizational shift in human history has been preceded by exactly this kind of institutional dissolution. The moment when the old organizing logic fails completely, and something new becomes not just possible but necessary. We're at that moment now. The question is not whether the old world ends. It is already ending. The question is what we build in its place, and whether we build it consciously, with a coherent set of values at its foundation, or whether we allow the same forces of concentrated power and manufactured fears to reassemble in a new form. 2. The Triad, a new measure of value. At the heart of this concept is a deceptively simple proposal that we are measuring the wrong things. For centuries, civilizations have organized themselves around the accumulation of material wealth, military power, and territorial control. These metrics produce the world we see: extraordinary technological advancement alongside chronic human suffering, environmental destruction, and the weaponization of human attention for profit and political manipulation. YodTalks proposes a different organizing principle, a triad of values that, when placed at the center of any human system, from a community to a city-state to a continental confederation, produces fundamentally different outcomes. First, the authenticity as the foundation. Second, authenticity is the commitment to act from genuine values, to communicate truthfully, and to be what one claims to be. It is not transparency for its own sake, it is alignment between inner reality and outer action. In governance terms, it means the institutions say what they will do and do what they say. In economic terms, it means that the actual costs and consequences of decisions are not hidden, externalized, or obscured. In personal terms, it means that individuals bring their real interests and real concerns into community life rather than performing compliance. Third, authenticity is placed first in this triad because without it, nothing else is reliable. Authenticity is placed first before kindness, because kindness performed without authenticity is manipulation. Connection without authenticity is loneliness in disguise. The entire edifice of the new system rests on this foundation. The second in this hierarchy of values after authenticity is kindness, the indicator. Kindness is not sentimentality. It is the active orientation of a community toward the well-being of its members and neighbors. In systemic terms, kindness is an indicator of health. Communities that practice it are communities whose members feel secure enough, valued enough, and connected enough to extend care outward. Cruelty, in law, in economics, in social norms, is always a symptom of systemic fear and deprivation. Kindness ranks second because it must never override truth. False kindness, the kind that avoids difficult realities to preserve comfort, produces exactly the institutional failures we see today. But authentic kindness, grounded in truth, is perhaps the most powerful source for social cohesion available to human communities. Third one in this triad of values, after authenticity and kindness, is authentic human connection. It is the currency. The third element of the triad is the quality and depth of genuine human bonds within and between communities. Connection is not mere interaction. Social media has demonstrated definitively that high volumes of interaction can coexist with profound social isolation. Authentic connection is characterized by mutual recognition, honest vulnerability, and the experience of being genuinely known and valued by another person. When authentic connection is understood as a primary measure of civilizational health, many of our current economic and political priorities are immediately revealed as absurd. Systems that destroy social fabric in the name of efficiency or growth are systems destroying their own foundation. Together, these three values constitute a new kind of currency, not metaphorically, but structurally. The architecture described in the following sections is designed to make these values measurable, verifiable, and the actual basis on which communities form, federate, and allocate resources. The architecture, blockchain as infrastructure for the new game. The technology required to operationalize the triad already exists. What has been missing is a coherent philosophical framework to direct its use. Blockchain technology, currently associated primarily with financial speculation, is in fact purpose-built for something far more important: the creation of decentralized, temper-resistant systems of trust between parties who do not share a centralized authority. This is precisely what the new governance architecture requires. From financial ledger to values ledger. The proposal is not to create a new cryptocurrency. It is to use blockchain and the blockchain infrastructure as the foundation for a distributed governance protocol, a system in which communities formally commit to the authenticity, kindness, connection triad, record their collective decisions transparently, and interact with the other communities on the basis of shared verified commitments rather than geographic proximity or historical power relations. Think of it as a constitutional layer that lives below national governance, not replacing local community life, but creating a framework within which diverse communities can cooperate across borders without surrendering their autonomy to a centralized authority that does not represent them. Opt-in participatory governance. One of the most significant innovations in this architecture is the replacement of representative democracy with opt-in participatory decision-making. The current democratic model requires that every citizen vests their political authority in a single representative who then makes decisions across the full range of governance: finance, military, education, health, culture, foreign policy, regardless of whether those citizens have interest in, knowledge of, or stake in each domain. This is structurally incoherent. It produces politicians who claim mandates they do not have, and citizens who feel perpetually misrepresented. The new architecture allows individuals to register their participation in specific decision domains based on genuine interest and demonstrated competence. A farmer participates in decisions about agricultural policy. A physician participates in health governance. A teacher shapes education policy. A community organizer shapes local infrastructure. No one is excluded from participating in what matters to them, but it's opt-in. They choose to vote, or they choose not to be concerned with and not to be asked about specific things. No one is required to make decisions about domains they neither understand nor care about. This is not elitism, it is coherence. The filtering criterion is not wealth, birth, or status. It is authentic engagement. The blockchain layer makes this verifiable and transparent. Participation histories, decision records, and community commitments are publicly auditable. City-states and confederations. The geographic unit of this architecture is not the nation-state. That accident of war, conquest, and the 19th century nationalism, but the city-state or coherent local community. A human-scale unit in which governance is genuinely responsive to the people it governs, where leaders are known personally, where the consequences of decisions are locally visible. City-states that adopt the Triad framework can confederate with other city-states, not on the basis of geographic contiguity, but on the basis of shared commitment to the foundational values. A city in Georgia can be in meaningful federation with a city in Portugal, a neighborhood cooperative in Colombia, and a rural community in Japan, if they share the same governance commitments, can verify each other's authenticity through the blockchain protocol. This produces a world organized by values rather than the borders. It does not eliminate geography. People still live in places, but it decouples governance, trade, and cultural exchange from the historical accidents of national boundaries. Attention is sacred, reclaiming the human mind. No analysis of civilization's current crisis is complete without confronting the attention economy. The systematic capture and commodification of human attention by digital platforms, political actors, and advertising systems represents perhaps the most profound violation of human autonomy in the modern era. More pervasive than surveillance, more damaging than censorship, because it operates not by restricting what people can see, but by corrupting the very instrument with which they see it. When humans' attention is bought and sold, when the direction of a person's consciousness becomes a commercial product, something essential in the fabric of human community is destroyed. Authentic relationship requires genuine presence. Authentic governance requires genuine reflection. Authentic connection requires that we actually encounter each other rather than curated performances of each other designed to maximize engagement metrics. The YodTalks framework is unequivocal on this point. Attention is not for sale. In the architecture of the new system, the principle that no commercial or political actor may purchase access to a citizen's attention without explicit, revocable, informed consent is foundation, as fundamental as the right to vote or the right to speak. This has profound implications for the design of platforms, the structure of information systems, and the business models of media organizations. In practical terms, it means digital platforms built on the new governance architecture are structurally prohibited from algorithmic manipulation of attention for commercial or political purposes. Advertising in any form, commercial, political, ideological, requires explicit opt-in from each individual recipient and cannot be the financial foundation of any public information infrastructure. The attention economy's business model, free services in exchange for behavioral data and attention manipulation, is incompatible with authentic community and must be replaced with models based on genuine value exchange. The recovery of human attention is not a luxury. It is a prerequisite for everything else described in this paper. You cannot build authentic governance among people whose capacity for sustained attention and independent reflection has been systematically degraded. Reclaiming attention is the first act of civilizational renewal. Justice as healing, the end of fear-based punishment. The current criminal justice system is, in most of the world, is built on a single psychological mechanism, fear. The theory is that the prospect of punishment deters harmful behavior. The evidence accumulated over centuries is that the theory is largely wrong, and that the actual effect of punitive incarceration is the creation and consolidation of exactly the social pathologies it claims to address. Prisons, as currently constituted, are schools for harm. They concentrate traumatized, desperate, and dangerous people in environments of violence and dehumanization. Strip them of the social connections and economic opportunities that might support genuine change, and release them, if they are released, more damaged and more isolated than when they entered. The recidivism rates in punitive systems are not an accident. they are a structural output. The YodTalks framework proposes a fundamentally different understanding of harmful behavior. That it is almost always a symptom of psychological wounding, developmental deprivation, or social disconnection. And that the appropriate response is therefore not punishment, but healing. This does not mean the absence of consequences. When someone's behavior harms others, there must be accountability, protection of those harmed, and genuine repair. But accountability and healing are not in tension. They are, in the new framework, the same processes. The person who has caused harm must face what they have done, understand its impact, and participate actively in making it right. This is not easier than imprisonment. In many ways, it is harder, but it produces actual change rather than suppressed resentment. In the new architecture, communities maintain professional psychological healing centers, not punitive facilities, where individuals whose behavior deviates significantly from the community's foundational values are required to participate in intensive, therapeutic, restorative, and community reintegration processes. The goal at every stage is restoration of the harmed party's wholeness, of the community's integrity, and of the offending individual's capacity for authentic participation in social life. Fear is removed from the system, not because consequences are eliminated, but because the nature of consequences changes from suffering inflicted as a deterrent to growth facilitated as repair. This shift alone would transform the social fabric of any community that adopted it. Education as humanist formation. The current model of history education in most of the world is at its core a nationalization of children's minds. Children are taught from the earliest age and to understand themselves as members of a particular national story, with its heroes and villains, its triumphs and humiliations, its claims of the child's loyalty, and its designation of who is to be regarded as other, suspect, or enemy. This is not education. It's the reproduction of the conditions for future conflict. The YodTalks framework proposes a radical resequencing of formation. Children in the early years are educated first as human beings, in curiosity, in empathy, in the capacity to encounter difference without fear, in the skills of authentic communication and genuine connection. They learn the common story of humanity, the shared vulnerabilities, the universal experiences of love and loss and wonder, the common project of understanding the world we share. History, the specific, often violent, always complex story of how particular human communities have lived and struggled and related to each other, comes later, when young people have the psychological and moral development to encounter it without discernment rather than absorbing it as tribal programming. When they do encounter it, they encounter it as humanists first, people capable of recognizing the full humanity of every actor in the historical drama, of learning from the past without being enslaved to it, and of choosing consciously which aspects of their heritage to carry forward and which to transform. This approach does not erase history or pretend that the past didn't happen. It changes the relationship of the learner to the history, from passive inheritor of a predetermined narrative to active, reflective agent who boosts their relationship to their inheritance. The difference is civilizational outcomes between these two approaches. The difference is immeasurable. The role of artificial intelligence. This paper would be incomplete without direct engagement with the role of artificial intelligence in the new architecture, not as a technical footnote, but as a central structural element. AI, as it currently exists and it is being developed, represents both the greatest opportunity and the greatest risk of the civilizational transition. The risk is familiar. AI systems controlled by governments or corporations become instruments of surveillance, behavioral manipulation, and the concentration of decision-making power in fewer and fewer hands. This is the trajectory of AI development as currently practiced by most of the dominant actors in the field, and it leads directly to the opposite of everything described in this paper. The opportunity is less widely understood. AI, when built on an open, decentralized architecture and oriented by the authenticity, kindness, connection triad, becomes the connective tissue of the new governance system, the layer that makes complexity manageable without concentrating power. Specifically, AI in the new architecture serves as a translation and mediation layer between communities, enabling genuine cross-cultural communication without the distortions of political or commercial intermediaries. A collective intelligence amplifier, helping communities process complex decisions, surface minority perspectives that would otherwise be lost, and identify the genuine common ground within diverse groups. A verifiable record keeper, maintaining the transparency of governance processes, decision histories, and community commitments in a way that is auditable by any participant. A pattern recognition system for community health, identifying early signs of systemic distress, breakdown of authentic communication, and erosion of the foundational values so that the communities can respond before crisis. The critical architectural requirement is that AI systems in this framework are not owned by any government, corporation, or individual. They are open source, collectively governed, and auditable by any member of the communities they serve. The transparency of AI decision-making is a non-negotiable, as non-negotiable as the transparency of human governance. An AI that cannot explain its reasoning in terms that a non-specialist can evaluate is an AI that concentrates power. And power concentration is the one structural feature the new architecture is explicitly designed to prevent. AI is, in this framework, an expression of collective human intelligence, not a replacement for it, not an authority over it, but a tool that belongs to the people who use it, shape it, and shaped by values they have chosen and accountable to the communities it serves, and no to architects and developers. This paper is addressed in part directly to you, the software engineers, system architects, AI researchers, and platform builders who are right now making the decisions that will shape the infrastructure of the next civilization. You are not neutral. Every architectural choice encodes values. A system designed to maximize engagement encodes the premise that attention is a resource to be extracted. A system designed to maximize data collection encodes the premise that the human behavior is a commodity. A system designed to concentrate administrative control encodes the premise that some people's judgments is worth more than others. These are not technical decisions, they are moral ones, and the consequences are civilizational in scale. The invitation of this paper is to build differently, specifically, build for opt-in, not opt-out. Default to privacy, consent, and user control. Assume that users are agents, not subjects. Build for transparency, not opacity. If a system cannot explain what it is doing and why, it should not be doing it. This applies to algorithms, to data use, the governance processes, and to AI reasoning. Build for decentralization. Resist the gravitational pull toward centralized architecture, not because decentralization is always technically superior, but because centralization of information systems is centralization of power. And centralization of power produces exactly the institutional failures this paper addresses. Build with values-first design. Before any technical specification, establish the value commitments the system is meant to serve. Write them down, make them public. Build auditing mechanisms that verify the system is actually serving those values in practice, not just in theory. Built for interoperability. The new architecture is not one platform, it is a protocol. The measure of success is not how many users your platform captures, but how easily communities using your tools can cooperate with communities using different tools that share the same foundational values. Participate in governance. The communities your tools serve have a legitimate claim on the direction of your work. Build mechanisms for the participation that are genuine, not performative consultations, but actual shared decision-making about the systems that shape community life. The tools described in this paper need to be built. The blockchain governance protocols, the opt-in participatory decision platforms, the attention-respecting communication infrastructure, the AI systems that are collectively owned and values-aligned, these are not utopian fantasies. They are engineering challenges. The question is whether the people with the skills to build understand what they are building toward. The conclusion. The new world is not coming, it is being built. The thesis of this paper is simple. The old organizational logic of human civilization, nation states, representative democracy, fear-based justice, attention commodification, the concentration of power in centralized institutions has exhausted its potential, and it is in irreversible collapse. The collapse is not an accident or failure. It is the natural consequence of a system that was always built on incomplete and distorted premises about human nature and human community. The new world does not require a revolution in the conventional sense, a violent seizure of existing power structures. It requires something more profound and more difficult, a revolution of the organizing principles of human association. When the measure of value changes, everything built to generate value by the old measure becomes obsolete. When authenticity, kindness, and authentic human connection replace extraction, manipulation, and fear is the foundational values of human community, the institutions designed to serve the old values dissolve of their own weight. This is not idealism, it is systems logic. It is also increasingly empirical reality. The communities, platforms, and organizations that are thriving in the current environment are precisely those that have, consciously or instinctively, organized themselves around something closer to the triad than the old logic. The question is whether the emergence remains scattered and fragmented, or whether it finds a coherent architecture that allows it to scale. YodTalks offers this paper as one contribution to that architecture, not as a final answer, but as an opening. The conversation begins is the conversation that matters most right now. Not about which party should govern, not about which economic model should prevail, but about what kind of world we actually want to live in and what we need to build together to make it real. Zoran Maisuradze, YodTalks with Claude by Anthropic, Tbilisi, Georgia, originally published on Medium on April 10th, 2026. And this concept paper may be freely shared, cited, and built upon with attribution. Thank you for your attention.